Sometimes the first thing I think in the morning is why I keep going. Within hours of being awake, I'll see a bunch of signals that this society hates me and that the world is falling apart. I'll watch countless innocent people suffer while the people causing their suffering deny or justify it, and the people who benefit from it cheer. I think, why doesn't somebody stop this? Why don't we stop this? And then I'll remember that this is the way the society was built to work. It runs on blood. And when I think about all this, I think I don't want to live in a world like this. Sometimes people make me feel like I'm the only one that feels this, like I'm the only one that sometimes wants to jump off this slave ship we call a society. No, but Andre, life is beautiful, they say, or it's a selfish thing to do, my dad says, or it's the coward's way out, some stranger yells at me on the street. They act like I'm being unreasonable, but how is it unreasonable to want to leave a world that was built and thrives on your people suffering? But the world can change, they say. I tried to change the world, and all I got was new trauma from other activists and this lousy t-shirt. It's not unreasonable to think that if this world is built to be cruel and unfair and the revolutionaries are too busy fighting each other to beat it, that life might start feeling chaotic, absurd, meaningless, unbearable. I looked it up. Read a bunch about black people and suicide under slavery and Jim Crow, and in some of the most famous pieces of black literature, I found black luminaries saying that living while black in an anti-black world made them wish for death. Like in Olada Equiano's memoir, he wrote about his time on the slave ship saying, "I expected every hour to share the fate of my companions, some of whom were almost daily brought upon deck at the point of death, which I began to hope would soon put an end to my miseries." Frederick Douglass confessed, "I often found myself regretting my own existence and wishing myself dead. And but for the hope of being free, I have no doubt that I should have killed myself." I also found that there's a bunch of black people that feel like me. I read somewhere that the suicide rate among black men jumped by 80% in the early part of this decade, and that racism was a primary factor, and nobody's talking about it. But I digress. The point is that everyday oppression can challenge the motivation to live. Even with all that said, I still didn't find suicide nearly as common under Jim Crow and slavery as I expected. Some of that is probably because our oppressors weren't keeping detailed records like that about suicide. They also tried everything they could to prevent suicides because it meant depleting their workforce and losing investments. But even so, even when self-killing was more common among the enslaved, it was done more often because they believed their souls would return to Africa. So actually, hope was a stronger motivator towards self-killing than despair. And even when they did, they were more likely to do so as an act of refusal or out of spite for their masters as opposed to despair. So what I was looking at was that even under the most brutal systems of racial oppression I could imagine, for the most part, our predecessors didn't lose the motivation to live, even while living under duress. And I think that Frederick Douglass quote hints at how, because Douglass said that the hope of freedom kept him in the world. In other words, there was some reward to get out of living. And I've been learning lately that motivation is directly tied to our brain's reward system. So, for example, I've always struggled to floss as much as I should. And I learned from Rick Hanson that instead of doing what everyone tries to keep me alive, which is lecture me about how I should feel about life and respond to my mental pain, you should floss, Andre, you need to floss, Andre, you lose more teeth if you don't floss, Andre, I'd be more motivated to floss if I focus on the rewards for flossing, the feeling of a clean mouth, the cool air, the minty taste. I like that feeling. I want that feeling. I'm gonna floss. I think black people have been doing that with life for centuries. We focus on life's rewards and it keeps us going. It makes me think of the Freedom Legacy Monument Park in Montgomery, Alabama. The park is full of these powerful art installations that depict black history, and there's one that lives rent-free in my head. It's this board displaying several newspaper clippings after slavery ended. And in those clippings, so many of them, former black captives are seeking to reconnect with a spouse that they've been separated from while enslaved. And there's something so profound to me about the fact that the first thing many of these people did after the nightmare of slavery was search for their partner. The hope of reunion kept them going. So I've been trying to practice motivation to live by paying attention to life's rewards. The song of survival I wrote to explore this inner strength, something worth living for, is one of my first attempts at doing this. I found inspiration for that song while I was in a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains. For weeks, I've been wrestling with this question I was first asked in therapy: what's worth waking up for in the morning? I think that's an essential question when talking about motivation to keep going in a world built to break us, and that question stumped me for weeks. But that night in the cabin, I found myself thinking about the amazing conversation I had with another activist earlier that day over these delicious homemade summer rolls with lemongrass chicken. I remembered our laughs and how they bounced off those stone walls of my friend's kitchen. I remembered tears streaming down my face as I heard a new song that night that spoke to my soul. I remembered the majestic beauty of the Appalachian forest and the feeling that it whispered to me, "You're here because I love you," as I walked into W.E.B. Du Bois' birthplace. I remembered the taste of cinnamon and sugar on the croissant I ate that morning, and I thought to myself, wouldn't you like to do all that again tomorrow?